Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, although a ceasefire in South Sudan's capital seems to be tentatively holding after days of violence, foreign nationals are being evacuated. 2 years of civil war sees refugees elsewhere trying to return to Sudan, the country from which they fought for independence. Also, in Mali, several people are killed in the northern city of Gao during anti-government protests. They accuse the police of firing on them as they set off on a march that had been banned by authorities. And on day 2 of his trip to France, South African President Jacob Zuma heads to a site in the north of the country to remember the black soldiers who fought and died there in World War I. For almost a century, they haven't been honoured on the same terms as white troops. Well, first, foreign governments continued to arrange citizens' evacuations from South Sudan's capital on Tuesday, despite a ceasefire called by the president and his deputy the day before appearing to hold. Almost 300 people have been killed in days of fierce fighting between army forces loyal either to leader Salva Kiir or his number 2, Riek Machar. The flare-up puts into jeopardy an arrangement aimed at ending 2 years of brutal civil war. The UN believes that at least 36,000 people have been displaced by the latest violence, but many have been prevented from leaving the city to find safety.
We are deeply concerned at reports of civilians being prevented from seeking refuge in the premises of the UN mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, and in some cases being shot at while trying to do so. We are also deeply worried at reports that UN compounds and protection of civilians' side have been directly caught in the fighting and apparently at times directly targeted.
While the fighting in Juba is just one facet of a conflict that has not really gone away for many, the years of instability have caused South Sudan's worst ever food crisis. Many people have decided that trying to cross the border back into Sudan is better than staying put, even if they fought for over a decade for independence from Khartoum. But returning is proving difficult, as our Simona Foltin found out.
Leaves, even when cooked, do not make a good meal by anyone's standards. But after last year's harvest failed in northern Bahr Ghazal, it's all these people have left. Desperate, many have started the journey back to Sudan, the country they voted to separate from just 5 years ago.
It's very difficult to find food here. I'm a widow and can't afford to take care of these children all by myself. That's why I want to go to Sudan.
Over 100,000 are said to have left to Sudan. Thousands more are stranded at the border, which is officially closed amid ongoing political tensions between the two countries. None of these people have the necessary exit permits, granted only on exceptional basis by South Sudanese authorities.
The South Sudanese are a problem. They don't feel good about the movement of people to Sudan. That's why we're now stuck here in Kir Adem.
The border with Sudan is only a few kilometers that way, and even 5 years after South Sudan's independence, the border area remains contested. We were only able to come here with a military escort, and the sensitive nature of this area has also made it difficult for humanitarian agencies to deliver aid. The government is uncomfortable that so many are abandoning their nation so soon after independence and is urging people to stay.
That one we did not allow them to go. We are trying our level best if there is a help somewhere. We wish that these people of ours could be helped. Maybe next year the situation will come good for them.
But this year's harvest doesn't look promising either. Farmers don't have seeds, while pests and erratic rains make it difficult to grow most things.
We're only growing groundnuts. We haven't planted any sorghum because we only had one bag from last year's harvest, and the children ate it all. So there are no seeds for planting this year.
And so for now, all these people can do is wait. Wait for a better harvest, wait for aid, wait for the border to reopen, and hope that one day their country will finally deliver the promise of a better life they fought for so long.
At least 3 people have reportedly been killed in anti-government protests in Mali. Demonstrators accuse security forces of opening fire on crowds in Gao as they rallied against some of the terms of a peace agreement aimed at ending unrest in the north.
The sound of gunfire in the streets of Gao. Hundreds of youths demonstrated despite a ban on protests. Several people were killed. Protesters had 2 main demands. They want to be integrated into the army, and they refuse to be ruled from Friday onwards by Tuareg armed groups who signed a peace deal last year with the government.
Those who looted this country cannot come back and impose their laws on us. That is not possible. We cannot accept that. We said this was a peaceful march and the authorities want chaos. They sent the army and the police and they fired real bullets.
The authorities argued they only dispersed the crowd.
We used real bullets, but we fired up in the air. We didn't target anyone. It was simply to tell people to go home. They are our brothers. We are from the same country. There's no reason for us to shoot our brothers.
It's in this tense context that jihadist groups carry out sporadic attacks in northern Mali. They often target the UN mission. More than 30 peacekeepers have been killed this last year.
The organiser of Zimbabwe's biggest shutdown protest in a decade has been charged with inciting public violence after recording a very prescient video for his followers.
Fellow citizens, Ivan Mawarire here. You are watching this video because I've either been arrested or I've been abducted.
Well, after a national shutdown last week, the leader of This Flag campaign, Pastor Evan Mawarire, called for another 2-day job walkout due to start tomorrow. The protests were due to be held over corruption, police brutality and unpaid salaries. He was summoned by the police and handed himself over on Tuesday. The government's warned that it will come down hard on anyone who tries to strike anyway. Ugandan opposition leader Kizza Besigye waved to chanting supporters in court as he was freed Tuesday, following 2 months in jail over treason charges. A judge rejected prosecutors' calls for him to be kept behind bars indefinitely until his case is wrapped up. He accused President Yoweri Museveni of fraud in February's presidential election and was arrested last month for holding a mock swearing-in ceremony. He's been arrested several times before, but never convicted of anything. On Tuesday, he said that he wasn't sure how long his freedom would last this time. The latest round of peace talks in Burundi have hit another hurdle. The government's team representatives has boycotted the negotiations in the Tanzanian city of Arusha. They say that they're not happy about some of whom the mediators decided to invite to the dialogue, accusing some of them of membership of terror organizations. The country's been in crisis for over a year over the controversial third-term mandate of President Pierre Nkurunziza. Some of his critics say that it is unconstitutional. Well, Tuesday saw day 2 of South African President Jacob Zuma's trip to France. And he headed to a site in the north of the country to honour black soldiers who died at the spot in World War I. At the time, South Africa was still a British colony, but though its black men travelled to fight, they faced restrictions of movement and until recently did not have their contribution fully acknowledged.
14,000 names of South African soldiers, white and black alike, engraved in marble side by side. The memorial's inclusion of the black troops who came to France and lost their lives here 100 years ago is long overdue.
The
names are in alphabetical order, in order to show a natural integration of South African soldiers. We didn't want them to be named by regiment, which would have emphasized a segregation, a separation from the other soldiers.
On 15 July 1916, a mixed force of 3,153 South African soldiers and officers was ordered to hold Delville Wood at all costs. They succeeded, but after 5 days and 6 nights of fighting, only 142 men survived. Until now, Only white victims were officially commemorated.
We have to continue to correct the past wrongs. Yet, the role played by the South African Native Labour Corps has received hardly any attention in South African military history.
A sacrifice that transcends color. Today, memories carry equal weight for both black and white descendants of the fallen soldiers.
There are two uncles. One uncle was with my father here, and he lived. Another uncle, he is buried at Bini in Artois. So I have been here many times before, but today is a very special 100 years.
In 2014, the remains of Private Biletsa Mnyangwa, the first black South African killed in the battle, were transferred here.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us.